r/AskReddit. Redditors who are dating someone that went from I think I want to marry this person to I think I need a restraining order. What happened? The worst version I have of this was a guy that I had been dating who rammed my truck with a moving van repeatedly at an immigration checkpoint in New Mexico well after dark. He thought it was funny. He'd been behaving badly, but I just thought it was the stress of the move. The aggravated assault by U-Haulers when I decided to break up with him. He stalked me 4 years after that, harassing me at work, which led to me getting fired. I switched from law firms to legal software, and that seemed to make it harder to find me. His stalking ended in blowing up a brick and mortar mailbox with plastic explosives. I think he laid low after that, because the FBI was looking for him. He eventually moved back to California. Years later, an ex-girlfriend of his contacted me about 7 years later when she was settling his estate. She wanted to make sure there weren't any children. We were spending a large amount of time together, with me staying at his house several nights of the week. He went mad one day because he said we weren't spending enough time together. He pulled out a notepad and drew up a schedule, outlining in excruciating detail each hour that I would spend with him throughout the week from then on. I distinctly remember sitting there, saying nothing and feeling like I was in the twilight zone. Things got significantly crazier from then on, but this moment always sticks out in my mind. Edit 1. I've just woken up to lots of messages of support. Thanks so much. I'm very happy to have gotten away from this kind of controlling behavior. This was a number of years ago, and I have done much healing since then. BTW. On a slightly more amusing, but equally crazy note, this guy also once wrote a book about me. A full-scale novel. Edit 2. Lots of people asking about the novel. We had been broken up for a few weeks when he randomly emailed me a PDF. The novel had a picture of me on the front cover. It was a romance story about the entire lives of two people. It was very clear that these characters were supposed to be us, thinly disguised with different names. It was a fictional imagining of what our lives would have been like together, with entire chapters on our wedding and our sex life. Shudder. It was so clear that this was an over-the-top attempt to get me back. The book was clearly written in a great hurry and was full of mistakes. He kept slipping pronouns, totally forgetting that he was writing a third-person novel, and addressing me directly by saying things like "you know I'm your destiny." Screams him a thing. No one will ever make you feel the way I do. I highly doubt he tried to get it published. I was 15, dumb as fuck, because I'd never really been in a serious relationship before, and had no idea what I was doing. This was my first love, so of course I was convinced I was gonna marry him. He was 18 and a total piece of shit. He told me he loved me, that we were gonna be together forever, and sold me on the idea of a perfect life. I wanted to be grown so bad that I jumped at my chance to feel like an adult. The crazy thing is, there's not a singular event or thing he did to trigger a grandiose get the fuck away from me moment. He was shitty from the beginning. Our first date as a couple was homecoming. He was actually taking another girl to homecoming as a friend, but the week of he told me he cancelled on her so he could go as my date. Instead of seeing this as the red flag it was, 15-year-old me thought it was some grandiose romantic gesture. It was only downhill from there. He expected me to be on the phone with him constantly when I wasn't at school. I would get home from school and he would expect me to call. If I took too long to do it, he would yell at me. We would stay on the phone until I literally fell asleep. On the weekends, I was expected to call him as soon as I woke up. If I slept until late he would yell at me. What were we talking about? Literally nothing. He would expect me to stay on the phone with him sitting in silence for hours and get mad if I said I wanted to go. Half the time he would get mad at me anyway for not having anything to say, never mind the fact that he didn't have anything to say either. Anytime I told him I would be out of town for the weekend for a family or optional school trip he would get angry at me. It took at minimum an hour to get him to tell me what his deal was. Every time he would tell me he had this amazing weekend planned and we were gonna go out and do all these fun things. Never mind the fact that he never had any plans for any of the weekends I was in town. He did get physical on a couple of occasions, but dumb teenager me just thought it was because he was so passionate. I kinda realized I was in over my head when he started pressuring me to have sex. I didn't want to, but he did. And he talked about all these plans about going to a hotel room and how amazing it was going to be. It made me super uncomfortable, but after a while I just started going along with making the plans because I knew it meant we would move past the subject faster. I'm not sure what happened. I was talking with my mom one day and something just snapped. It was like 1 minute I was head over heels with this guy and the next I was repulsed by the very idea of him. My mom made and executed a plan beyond what I could have handled myself. I ended it over the phone because I was scared of how he would react in person. My mom contacted his parents and told them what was going on. She contacted the school to make sure I had support there too. I made it clear to him in no uncertain terms that he shouldn't talk to me or come around me at all. He drove by my house frequently for a couple of days. My mom called me out of school for a week. He would sit outside on the street for an hour or two at a time. Even our neighbors got involved in helping us. They would warn us if he was outside or let us know if he came by when we were out. It got kinda bad and I went to stay with my dad for a few days. He came by and left a card and a stuffed bear on the porch at my mom's on Valentine's Day. Eventually he just stopped. But I spent a lot of time scared out of my mind not knowing if or when he was going to pop up. Even after he stopped coming around, I still have no idea why he stopped, but I won't forget that kind of fear. Started dating not long after a previous relationship. At first everything was amazing, and I did everything for this girl. For my 21st birthday we went to Elton Towers with 2 of my friends, 1 boy and 1 girl. We stayed over at the hotel. We were all in the same room, having a drink and a laugh when suddenly my GF storms out the room for no reason. Rightly so, I follow her back to our room as to ask what's up. Before I can even finish my sentence she punches me square in the face, gets me to the floor, and kicks me about 5-6 times. I ask why, and it's because I'm apparently always looking at my girlfriend. Anyway, in the morning we set off home, and I assume all is well. We drop my friends off, and as I pull up to her house she puts her feet on my windscreen and kicks it 3/4 times, cracking it. Not sure why I stayed with her for a month after this, as she scratched at my face repeatedly when I accepted an old school friend on Facebook. I was dating a guy. I really liked him. He was smart, funny, and adventurous. We were getting pretty serious. He pretty much lived at my house. One weekend I went home for my dad's birthday. All of my brothers were home. I have 5 of them. We ate, drank, and were merry. One of my sister-in-laws took some pictures and posted them on Facebook with me tagged in them. Got back to my house Sunday evening and my boyfriend was coming over shorty to hang out / spend the night. When he got there he was basically frothing at the mouth. He shoved me and called me a whore. Started pushing me around, ranting about how he had to see me whoring myself all over the internet and hanging on a bunch of guys. I told him they were my brothers, but at that point I was done with him. I told him to get the fuck out of my house. He took that as an invitation to throw me up against a wall and try to force me to kiss him. My roomie heard the commotion and came out of her room with a bat. Then shithead made the only good decision he made that day and decided to leave. Kicked in a pantry door and wrecked some drywall on his way out though. I threw all his stuff in a dumpster. He ended up stalking me for years. Showing up drunk at places I'd moved to after we dated. Calling after I'd changed my number. Even texted me on the week of my wedding to ask me to reconsider marrying him instead. Yeah, you crazy fuck, I want to dump the love of my life for a crazy stalker. I started dating this amazing girl, but she was just getting out of an abusive marriage, and I was her first female partner. She started showing up at my work with flowers and coffee, which was sweet, but I had never told her where my office was. Then, she started showing up at my house at all hours, and would get upset when I needed to sleep. I worked grades. She then wanted me to meet her daughters, which I wasn't comfortable with, because we were in the first stages of a relationship. I decided to break it off. She was too needy, which was understandable coming from someone who had just left an abusive relationship and discovered their sexuality, but I wasn't the person that could guide her. She decided that I was just afraid of love and started leaving books of poetry on my porch and leaving long letters in my mailbox. I finally had to call law enforcement after I came home to her in my bed. She had taken a ladder to my second-story room window. I lived with roommates and broken in. I found her naked in my bed, covered in blood from cutting herself. She proceeded to tell me that I was the only thing keeping her alive. I cut off all contact, but I truly hope that she has gotten some help and is doing well. She was a wonderful woman, but so broken. I graduated. She wanted to transfer schools. So, we moved to a college town, where she told me she'd been accepted as a transfer. Turns out she hadn't been accepted, and when she applied, was not accepted. She got a job at Walmart, while trying to figure out her next move. After about 2 months she decides we should move to Pittsburgh. She's convinced this will solve all her problems and make her happy, except we are in a recession and I just got my first good job. I don't want to move. She became abusive. I didn't want to go home. She was constantly negative and on the edge of a screaming fight. I was just avoiding her at the end. We were together 4 years before that, and she was always moody but not abusive. 6 months of that, and she went to her hometown to take a semester at a local school and stay with her parents. I called her 2 weeks later and told her not to come back. It had been like a weight was lifted from me, and I never wanted to see her again. After being beat down mentally from her, I started suffering from erectile dysfunction at 22 years of age. Eventually I mustered the courage to leave her. She quickly moved on to someone else, who would later become her husband, and called me every week to basically rub it in, saying how much better he was than me, how much bigger he was than me, etc, etc. I moved out of state, changed my number, never heard from her again. She called my parents and even showed up at their home, but they told her to go away. About 10 years later my friend ran into an old friend of hers. Apparently my ex got arrested for beating her own mother, got out of jail, and beat her husband, then tried to take their kids from him. She was arrested again, and later released. Guess I dodged a huge bullet there. We were in a long distance relationship for over 3 years and eventually it started to fizzle. She'd tell me to move to the States and drop my college degree, my family and my animals to live as an illegal immigrant and I could just do whatever odd jobs I could find just to be with her. I told her I needed to wait. She'd get very upset every time I went out with friends and would bombard my Facebook wall with random crap and send me private messages with passive-aggressive insults and threats of suicide. I broke it off with her and moved on, but she kept messaging me asking to be friends. I tried but she'd randomly blow up at me insulting me for ruining her life by making her think she could be loved. I told her she did deserve love, and she'd get even more upset. We couldn't talk at all. Last year she messaged me yet again. We broke up in 2013. Telling me that I had a legal obligation to marry her, since I said I would 5 years ago, and therefore she expected me to just fly up there and fulfill my obligation to her. Had to block her. Edit. Sorry, I don't think I explained myself properly. It wasn't an exclusively online relationship. We did see each other. I would travel up there twice a year, whenever I had vacations from uni, and spend about 2 months with her, which were always great. She'd just get incredibly possessive and insecure when we were apart, because my social life started to blossom down here, and she was scared I'd meet someone else. Once I stayed for 6 months until the very last day of my visa. I was dating a guy who was very sweet in the beginning. After about 6 months he got possessive. He didn't trust me. An example of this was one night I told him I was meeting a friend I used to work with at a bar a block away. We lived in a safe area, and it was a short walk. Her name sounded like it could be male or female, but I assured him she was a she. He showed up at the bar while we were there, and it made him look very insecure. He began tracking my phone's GPS. I found out when I stopped at a relative's house after work on my way home, and he freaked out and called my mom. She actually knew that was where I was, and he had a hard time believing I wasn't cheating. The last straw was my first week at a new job. I worked nights and had my phone. I got this long-winded email regarding an innocent comment on a Facebook selfie of me. There were screenshots of it and a huge manifesto about why my buddies online all wanted to take me away from him. After I broke up with him, I got emails for months swinging between apologies and telling me I was the abuser. I got emails telling me he was being drugged. It was insane. When I was in a relationship that went from good and fun to why am I smashing plates in a blind rage in a year and a half, I really didn't appreciate how much someone can drag you into hell with them. I think my crazy was self-defense. The first 9 months or so were amazing. We had so much fun, threw great parties for all our friends, went to all the concerts, etc. Then for about 5 to 6 months things got rocky, and he started becoming obsessed with the idea that I was emotionally cheating on him. The last 3 months were pure hell. The things he was accusing me of made no sense. The situations we would get into were insane, and somehow always my fault, and he would abandon me there saying I was the reason things had gotten out of control, and that he had to leave for his own protection. It made me feel like a monster. I signed up with a therapist because I thought I was having a psychiatric break. After a while, every time I saw him, it started with my apologies for how I acted the last time, and I would try to be as shut down as possible, and then my phone would buzz, and he would look at me accusingly, and then act distant the rest of the night, and I would be like, it's my mom. My mom is texting me. Look, my phone is unlocked. It's just my mom. And he would still act sour the whole rest of the night, withholding affection. Every physical gesture of disgust and disappointment. Every moment of every day became a full-time job of proving to him I was better, that I wasn't crazy, but everything I did to do that made me look crazier. I left him in a huge dramatic fit of rage finally, and it took months to normalize, and only in hindsight can I see how I went from being a pretty normal person with normal people problems to followed him to the depths of my personality's ability to retaliate against lies, and then I fought my way kicking and screaming out of that hole and left him down there. I had never acted that way before or since. I have never gotten into rages towards anyone like that, other than when in that relationship with him, and this was 4 years ago, so I'm pretty sure I'm not insane, as it started and stopped all within the time he was in my life. The only consolation is that within months of us breaking up, he burned every bridge with every friend we had, lost his job, and ended up moving out of state. I still live here and have a pleasant quiet life with someone else, and I'm still friends with the people that were our mutual friends during that relationship. I'm a lot less judgment when I see someone have a very out of character age fit now though. Jesus Christ, it is so possible to be sucked into someone else's crazy, and since it's all out of context for you, you don't know how to act, and you look like the crazy one. This is about my sister. She and her ex dated on and off in high school. At some point in the 8th grade, he admitted he was in love with her, and she admitted she had feelings for him too, so they started dating in 10th grade. I told her something was off about him. I'm not necessarily an intuitive person. I try my hardest not to judge a situation too quickly, but something about him just rubbed me the wrong way. They dated for about 6 months and he began showing signs of abusive behavior. Like others have stated, he began calling her and keeping tabs on her. He demanded to know when she made it home and when she went to sleep. He demanded that she edit her social media, MySpace, at this time, to include pictures of them and only them so everyone knew they were together. She visited me in the hospital. I had a severe stomach flu. Something wasn't right, and she told me she wanted to break up with him. She told me she was a bit scared of him. He was a big guy, maybe 6 feet 4 inches, about 230 pounds. My mom begged her to end it with him and she did. The calls kept pouring in for about 2 weeks and she did her best to avoid him. Once I was back in school, I happened to catch an encounter between the two of them. He had her pinned against her locker telling her she wasn't leaving until they talked things out. I told him to back off, and he threatened me, and then she threatened him. He stormed off, punched her locker, broke 2 of his fingers. He dropped it for a while. He popped up a few years later on the morning of my sister's wedding with a love letter. We are not sure how he knew she was getting married. We all had him blocked on social media. The letter was mailed to our home which she no longer lived in. He hasn't come around anymore, but honestly, I would not put it past him. My sister's husband is an avid hunter, so that may be what's keeping him away. I'll throw my hat into the ring here. Dated a chick years ago. She was essentially everything I thought I wanted in a girl. She was cute, funny, liked just enough things I liked for us to have common interests, but just different enough to show each other new things and experiences. I was heavy into her, and she was heavy into. Then things got weird. She started getting jealous of high school friends I'd known way before her, and even went as far as telling me I wasn't allowed to hang out with some of my female friends except for the few she thought were uglier than her. Things got worse. She started getting jealous of inanimate objects like my game consoles and video games, some of which she gave me. It came to a head when my grandmother asked me to watch her dog. She was a tiny hand dog that I adored, and one day I was half asleep and saw her literally kick this tiny dog off my bed, like with her feet. I asked her what the hell her problem was, and she told me that she doesn't like that I give the dog more attention than her. Things got even worse. She would physically abuse me when I did things she didn't like, such as bending my fingers, hitting me in the face, etc. Eventually everything I did she didn't like. After a while I got the courage to dump her ass, and she tries to tell me she's pregnant to keep me, which is an obvious lie. After that I discovered she'd still stalk my Facebook page and told some of her friends and mutual friends that I was the abuser. I also learned that when I was away she let dudes feel her up and other stuff too. Luckily I've landed a great girl that cares about me, and isn't a jealous psycho like she was. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.